The wind screamed across the frozen plains like 1,000 angry spirits. Snowflakes spun wildly, cutting through the air like sharp knives. The ground cracked under each step, hard and lifeless, covered in endless white ice. Daniel pulled his thermal coat tighter around his shoulders, his helmet lights glowing weakly through the storm. He had crossed many harsh worlds, but this planet felt colder than death itself. Each breath inside his helmet turned to mist, and every second in the storm was a battle against the freezing air. He walked carefully, scanning the stormy horizon. His mission was simple: map this part of the icy wasteland and mark safe routes for future landings. Yet in this endless night, even a simple mission became dangerous. The silence of the frozen world pressed down on him, heavy and strange. His radio crackled now and then, but the storm made signals weak. Daniel was alone with only his heartbeat and the howling wind to remind him that he was still alive. Then he heard something that froze him in place. It was faint at first, almost lost in the roar of the wind. A sound not made by nature. A sound not made by machines. It was a cry. A high, trembling cry that pierced through the storm. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He stood still, listening. Again the cry came, weak, broken, filled with fear. It was the cry of a child. Daniel felt his chest tighten. A child out here? Impossible, he thought. This land was unlivable for most life. His training screamed at him to ignore it. Strange voices in storms were often illusions, tricks of exhaustion, or worse, traps set by hostile species. But the sound was too real. It carried pain, it carried desperation. He turned his lights toward the darkness and followed the sound. The snowstorm pushed against him, almost as if the planet itself wanted to keep its secrets. He moved step by step, his boots sinking into the ice. The cry grew louder, clearer, pulling him forward like a thread. And then, through the swirling snow, a small shape appeared. It was tiny, no taller than his waist. A figure stumbling through the snow, arms wrapped around itself, shivering violently. Daniel's eyes widened. It was not human. Its skin glowed faintly blue, smooth and delicate, with eyes far too large for its small face. Two thin antennae bent sadly in the wind, and its hands clutched a torn piece of cloth. The creature staggered and nearly fell, but then it lifted its head. Those huge eyes met Daniel's helmet lights, and with a voice cracked from cold, it cried out, "Please, help me!" Daniel's heart pounded. The voice was young, innocent, full of terror. The little alien stumbled closer, its feet dragging. "Human?" it whispered, as if it knew what he was. "Please, my mom, she's dying." The storm howled louder, wrapping them in white fury. Daniel blinked, his mind racing. An alien child, alone, begging him for help. His training reminded him of the Galactic Code. Never interfere with alien life without clearance. The punishment for breaking it was severe. Yet his human heart, heavy in his chest, told him something else. Could he leave a child in the snow to die? He knelt down, trying to shield the small creature from the wind with his coat. Its body shook like fragile glass, ready to break. The alien girl, for now Daniel understood it was a girl, gripped his gloved hand tightly. Her touch was cold as ice, but her desperation burned like fire. "Where is your mother?" Daniel asked, his voice firm but gentle. The girl pointed with her trembling hand toward the distance. The snow was too thick to see far, but her eyes told him the truth. Somewhere out there, hidden in the blizzard, was her mother, freezing to death. Daniel looked back at the storm. The path ahead was dangerous, maybe even deadly. But he could not ignore the plea in the little one's eyes. Somewhere deep inside, beyond the rules, beyond the law, something human spoke to him. He had to go. He stood, lifting the girl into his arms. She was light, frighteningly light, as if the cold had already stolen most of her strength. Her head rested against his chest, and she whispered weakly, "Hurry, please." Daniel took a deep breath and stepped into the storm again. Each gust of icy wind clawed at him, but the sound of the child's desperate voice stayed in his ears. Every step became heavier, every second more dangerous, yet his determination grew. The frozen night around him felt endless, but he was no longer walking for himself. He was walking for the faint hope of a mother waiting somewhere in the storm, for the fragile trust of a child clinging to him with her last strength. And as the snow swallowed them both, Daniel realized he had crossed an invisible line. Whatever lay ahead, whether danger, punishment, or salvation, his choice was made. He would follow the cry of the little alien girl, because no matter what the law said, no human heart could ignore it. The storm raged like a living beast. Claws of frozen wind tearing at Daniel's coat as he pushed forward. The alien girl clung to him, Her small arms wrapped around his chest, her face buried against the heat of his suit. Every few steps she lifted her head, her glowing eyes filled with worry, scanning the storm as if searching for something only she could see. "There," she whispered suddenly, her voice weak but urgent. "She's there, in the ice." Daniel turned his helmet lights toward the direction she pointed. At first there was nothing, only the endless swirl of snow. Then, as he squinted, he saw the faint outline of something half buried in a ridge of frozen stone. It looked like a shelter but crude, almost broken. A patch of metallic scraps leaned against the ice wall, glowing faintly with alien markings. Daniel moved closer, boots crunching over frozen ridges. The girl struggled in his arms, reaching out. "Mom!" she cried. Her voice was lost in the wind, but Daniel felt the urgency in her trembling body. He lowered her gently and pulled the scraps aside. The storm screamed louder as if trying to stop him. Inside the hollow space was a sight that made his chest tighten. A woman, taller than the girl but fragile and weak, lay half buried in snow. Her skin was pale blue, darker at the edges where frost had bitten deep. Her lips trembled, eyes half closed, breath shallow and broken. The girl fell to her knees beside her mother, tears freezing on her cheeks. "Please wake up, Mom, please," she sobbed, pressing her tiny hands against the woman's face. Daniel crouched beside them, his gloves brushing the mother's cold skin. She was on the edge of death. He had seen hypothermia before on Earth's frozen mountains, but never in an alien body. Her heartbeat was faint, almost gone. His training screamed inside his head. Do not interfere with alien biology. Do not risk contamination. Do not violate Galactic Code 77. He knew the rules. They were burned into every explorer's mind. If the authority discovered he gave medical help to an alien, the punishment could be exile, even prison. But then the girl looked up at him, her eyes wide with desperate hope. "You're human. You're warm. You can save her," she pleaded. Her little voice cut through all the rules, all the warnings. Daniel's jaw tightened. Rules were made by lawmakers far away. This was here. This was now. A mother was dying in front of him. He tore off his heated survival cloak and wrapped it around the alien woman. The girl gasped softly as if watching a miracle. The fabric's warmth spread slowly, steam rising from the frost on her skin. The woman stirred faintly, her lips parting to whisper something in a weak, broken tone. Daniel leaned close, straining to hear through the storm. "Thank you," she breathed, her voice fragile, but the word was clear. Daniel felt something shift inside him. This was no trick, no trap, this was real. A family stranded in the storm, clinging to life. And now, because of him, there was a chance they might survive. But his relief lasted only a moment. Above them, the low hum of engines cut through the wind. Daniel froze. His helmet sensors picked it up instantly. A Galactic Authority drone sweeping the area. Its scanners pulsed through the storm, searching for illegal signals, for any act of interference. If it caught him here helping aliens, he was finished. He pressed the girl's shoulder gently. "Stay close. Don't make a sound," he whispered. She nodded, her antennae trembling. Daniel pulled out a portable heater from his survival pack, activating it and sliding it under the woman's cloak. The heat glowed faintly, but he quickly blocked it with his body, shielding the light from the drone above. His heartbeat thudded in his ears as the red scanning beam swept across the ridge. For a tense moment, the light brushed over the metal scraps, then moved away. The drone hovered, humming like a hungry predator, then drifted off into the storm. Daniel exhaled slowly, only now realizing how tightly he had been holding his breath. The alien mother's eyes fluttered weakly. She tried to speak again, her voice thin as wind. "My child," she whispered. Her hand lifted with trembling effort, touching the girl's face. The child pressed her small fingers over it, tears shining in her glowing eyes. Daniel adjusted the heater, watching the woman's shallow breaths become steadier, though still weak. He knew this wasn't enough. A heater and cloak could slow death, but they could not undo the damage already done. She needed shelter, real warmth, and medical care, fast. The girl looked at him again. "Please," she whispered, "don't let her die." Her words cut deep into him. In that moment, Daniel understood he was no longer just a human explorer obeying orders. He was the only hope standing between this child and her mother's death. He checked his scanner. His base was still many kilometers away. The storm made travel dangerous, but staying here meant certain death. He had no choice. Daniel lifted the mother carefully into his arms, wrapping her tighter in the cloak. She was feather light, her body weakened by the cold. The girl clung to his side, determined not to be left behind. The storm roared as he stepped out of the hollow, carrying them both. He could feel the weight of his decision pressing on his shoulders, heavier than the snow. The law might not forgive him, but his conscience had already chosen. As the frozen night swallowed them again, Daniel's steps grew stronger. He was no longer walking alone, he was carrying lives. And with each step, the storm seemed less like an enemy and more like a test. Somewhere deep inside, a fire burned against the cold. Humanity was not about rules, not about fear. It was about this, answering a cry in the night no matter who called for help. The storm never seemed to end. It roared and hissed like a monster chasing Daniel across the frozen wasteland. His legs ached as he carried the alien mother in his arms, her body wrapped in his survival cloak. The little girl walked beside him, holding onto his suit with her small, trembling hand. Every step was heavy, but he pushed on. He could not stop now. The heat from the portable unit inside the cloak kept the mother alive, but only just. Her breaths were shallow, uneven, and her lips whispered broken words Daniel could barely hear. Sometimes she called her daughter's name. Sometimes she murmured sounds in her own alien tongue. And once Daniel thought he heard her say a word every human understood. Cold. The girl looked up at him often, her big glowing eyes filled with a strange mix of fear and trust. "Is she going to be okay?" she asked softly. Daniel wanted to say yes, but the truth weighed on him like iron. "I'll do everything I can," he answered, his voice rough inside the helmet. He knew what that meant. To do everything was to break the law. Galactic Code 77 was clear. No human interference with alien biology, medicine, or survival. The reason, the authority claimed, was to prevent dependence, contamination, and chaos. But standing here with frost biting his faceplate and a dying mother in his arms, those reasons felt distant, cold, and empty. The storm cleared for a moment, opening a view of the frozen horizon. Daniel spotted a jagged cave entrance not far ahead, half hidden in the ice cliffs. He angled toward it. Inside, the walls glittered with frozen crystals, glowing faintly with trapped light. It was shelter, still freezing, but at least free from the killing wind. He laid the alien mother carefully against the icy wall. The girl knelt beside her, clutching her hand. Daniel removed his helmet, letting the frigid air bite his skin. He set up his heater near the cave wall and placed his emergency thermal blanket over the woman. Her chest rose and fell weakly. Daniel's heart thudded. He had one last option. In his pack was a human med injector, a small device loaded with warming stimulants and nanite boosters. It was designed for human explorers who collapsed from cold or exhaustion. It could push a frozen body back from death's door, but the drug was untested on aliens. It could heal her, or kill her instantly. He held the injector in his hand, staring at it. The law screamed in his mind. "If you use this, you break the code. If they find out, you are finished." Then he looked at the girl. She was watching him, her little hands pressed together as if in prayer. "Please," she whispered, "you can help." "I know you can." Daniel closed his eyes. He remembered his own childhood, his mother holding him through fever, through nights of sickness, never giving up. He thought of her face, her warmth, and he knew. He could not let this child lose her mother, not while he still breathed. He pressed the injector against the alien woman's neck. There was a soft hiss. For a moment nothing happened. Then her body shivered violently, her chest heaving as if life itself was being forced back into her. Her eyes flew open, glowing faintly in the darkness. She gasped, air rushing into her lungs, and her trembling hand clutched her daughter's face. "Mom!" the girl cried, tears running down her cheeks. She hugged her mother tightly as if afraid she would vanish. Daniel felt relief wash through him like fire. It worked, she was alive. For now. But his relief was cut short by a sharp sound. A faint buzz echoed outside the cave like a mechanical hornet in the wind. Daniel's blood ran cold. He knew that sound, a Galactic Authority drone. He ducked to the cave's mouth and peered out. Through the snow, he saw the machine gliding low, its red scanning light sweeping across the icy plain. It was hunting for violations, looking for someone exactly like him. His helmet system crackled. A message came through, cold and robotic. "Explorer Daniel, your vitals show unauthorized activity. Report your status." Daniel's heart pounded. The drone was reading his stress levels, his elevated heartbeat, his energy usage. It knew something was wrong. He glanced back at the girl and her mother. They were watching him with silent fear. If the authority found them, it was over. For all of them. He muted his transmitter and crouched low. He needed to hide the heat signatures. He grabbed his portable heater, switched it off, and pulled the cloak tighter around the mother. Then he activated a scrambler field from his survival kit, a risky tool that bent signals for only a short time. The cave's walls shimmered faintly, and the hum of the drone grew fainter as its scanners passed overhead. The silence that followed was suffocating. Daniel's hands shook slightly. He had broken the law, hidden evidence, and risked his future. There was no turning back now. The mother's weak voice broke the silence. She looked at him with glowing eyes, still faint but filled with gratitude. Why help us?" she whispered. Daniel hesitated. The truth was simple but dangerous. He looked at her and the child, then said quietly, "Because you asked. And because no one deserves to die in the cold." The girl pressed against him, smiling through her tears. In her eyes, he was no longer just a human explorer. He was something more. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the cave, a fragile warmth grew. Daniel knew the path ahead was dangerous. He had crossed a line, and the authority would not forgive him. But as he watched the mother breathing alive, he also knew something else. Sometimes to be human was to break the law. The cave gave them a brief moment of safety, but Daniel knew it could not last. The storm outside had grown stronger, and the Galactic Authority drone was still circling somewhere beyond the ridges. If he stayed here, the scanners would eventually lock onto his heat signatures. If he moved, the storm itself could kill them. He looked down at the alien mother. Her breathing was steadier now, but her skin was still pale and her strength was weak. The girl sat pressed against her side, clutching her hand tightly, refusing to let go. Daniel's mind raced. He had already broken the law by saving her. Now the only path left was to keep going, no matter the cost. His base was far, but it had medical supplies, real shelter, and energy fields strong enough to block any authority scan. That was their only chance. "We have to move," he said firmly. The girl looked up at him, her glowing eyes full of worry. "But the storm..." Daniel placed a hand on her small shoulder. "If we stay, they will find us. If we move, maybe we reach safety. I promise I won't let you fall." The girl hesitated, then nodded. "I'll walk. Just save my mom." Daniel carefully lifted the alien mother into his arms again. She was lighter than ever, like carrying a shadow. He secured the cloak tighter around her body, hiding her fragile frame from the biting wind. The girl walked close to his side, holding onto his suit as they stepped out into the storm. The wind struck like a hammer, nearly throwing him back. Snow blinded his vision, but his helmet sensors mapped faint outlines of the terrain. He angled toward the east, where jagged cliffs could shield them for part of the journey. Each step sank into ice, and every gust tried to tear the warmth from his body. Minutes felt like hours. The storm screamed endlessly, but through it all, Daniel heard the girl's soft voice. She was speaking to her mother, whispering words in her alien tongue as if to keep her awake. Sometimes she looked at Daniel and gave a small nod, as if drawing courage from his presence. They moved across a narrow ice bridge that cracked under their weight. The sound of splitting echoed like thunder beneath them. Daniel tightened his grip on the mother and pushed forward quickly, his boot slipping on the slick surface. The girl's small hand clung to his arm, her eyes wide with fear. The bridge groaned, then snapped. Daniel lunged forward, leaping to solid ground just as the ice behind them shattered and fell into the abyss. The girl collapsed against him, trembling. He steadied her, his own heart racing. "That was close," he muttered, trying to keep his voice calm. But inside, he knew the land itself was fighting against them. As they moved on, another danger revealed itself. From the shadows of the cliffs, a pair of glowing eyes appeared, then another and another. Alien predators, their bodies low to the ground, their fur white as the snow. They had smelled weakness. The girl gasped, clutching his arm. "Hunters," she whispered. Daniel set the mother down gently against a rock, then pulled his pulse rifle from his pack. The creatures crept closer, teeth bared, growls rumbling through the storm. He fired a warning shot into the snow, and the blast lit up the night. The beasts paused, their eyes narrowing. Then, with hungry snarls, they charged. Daniel fired again, beams slicing through the snow. One predator fell, but the others leapt aside, circling fast. He shouted to the girl, "Stay behind me." The storm and battle mixed into chaos. Teeth snapped inches from his arm. Claws scraped against his armor. He fired again, the recoil shaking his body. Two more beasts fell, but one managed to pounce. Daniel twisted, slamming the rifle butt into its skull. It howled and retreated into the storm, limping away with the others. Breathing hard, Daniel lowered his weapon. The girl ran to her mother, checking her quickly. She was weak but alive. Daniel reloaded his rifle with trembling hands. He could feel exhaustion creeping in, but he had no choice but to keep moving. The base was still far, and the night was growing colder. They pressed on, step by step, across frozen valleys and ridges. The girl's legs shook with fatigue, but she never complained. Sometimes she stumbled, and Daniel would steady her with his free arm. Her courage impressed him. She was just a child, yet her will to protect her mother burned stronger than the storm. After what felt like an eternity, Daniel's scanner blinked. A faint signal. His base was less than 10 kilometers away. Relief sparked inside him, but it was fragile. 10 kilometers in this storm could still kill them. And worse, his communicator buzzed again. "Explorer Daniel, your silence violates protocol. Report immediately." It was the commander's voice, sharp and cold. Daniel muted the channel instantly. He could not answer, not now, not with the truth on his shoulders. The girl tugged at his sleeve. "What is it?" she asked. Daniel shook his head. "Nothing we can't handle," he said, though doubt gnawed at him. The storm roared on as they trudged across the ice, carrying hope and fear in equal measure. Every step took them closer to safety, but also closer to discovery. The law was no longer just words on a screen. It was a shadow chasing him, ready to crush him the moment he faltered. Yet as the child leaned against him for strength, and as her mother breathed faintly in his arms, Daniel felt something stronger than fear. He felt purpose. He was no longer just an explorer mapping frozen land. He was the line between life and death for them, and no law, no storm, no drone in the sky could stop him from walking forward. The storm broke into silence as Daniel saw the faint outline of his base through the snow. The steel walls rose from the ice like a fortress, lights glowing dimly against the endless night. Relief touched him, but only for a moment. Inside those walls were not safety, but questions, scanners and laws that would not forgive. The alien mother lay limp in his arms, still alive, but fading. The girl stumbled at his side, her steps weak but determined. Her glowing eyes widened as she saw the human structure. "Is this your home?" she asked in wonder. Daniel hesitated. "It's a base. It can protect us, but we must be careful." The gates opened with a hiss, sensors sweeping his body. His ID chip registered, but the system flickered a warning. 2 extra heat signatures detected. Daniel's heart jumped. He quickly activated the scrambler in his pack, bending the readings just enough to confuse the scan. The warning blinked and disappeared. He stepped inside. The warmth of recycled air hit his face, making him shiver from the sudden change. The girl gasped, holding her mother tighter. For the first time, a little hope lit her expression, but Daniel's mind was not at ease. He moved quickly down the corridors, keeping his head low. He avoided the med bay. It was full of surveillance machines and authority-linked AI. If he took the mother there, the system would detect her alien DNA instantly. Instead, he carried her to his private quarters. The smallest space in the base, but the only one without constant monitoring. He laid her gently on his bed and covered her with his spare blankets. The girl sat beside her, stroking her mother's hand as if her touch alone could keep her alive. Daniel crouched beside them. He scanned the woman with his portable device. Her temperature was rising slowly, but her body was still fragile. Without advanced care, she would not last long. The girl looked at him. "You saved her. You saved us both." Daniel shook his head. "Not yet.
She needs more."
She needs medicine, treatment, things I cannot give here." His voice cracked slightly as he said it. Before the girl could answer, a sharp knock echoed at the door. Daniel froze. "Explorer Daniel," came a voice through the metal. It was Commander Rourke, firm and suspicious. "You've been off the grid too long. Report." Daniel's chest tightened. He glanced at the girl and pressed a finger to his lips. She nodded, clutching her mother tightly. He stood, forcing calm into his voice. "Yes, Commander. The storm delayed me. I've returned." The silence outside was heavy, then Rourke spoke again. "Your vitals spiked during the storm. Stress, irregular heartbeat. Explain." Daniel clenched his fists. The terrain was difficult. Ice collapse, predators, nothing more. There was another pause. Open the door! Daniel's mind raced. If he opened it, Rourke would see everything. The girl, the mother, the truth. And then it would all be over. He looked back at the child. Her eyes begged him not to give them up. His heart hammered. He had sworn an oath to obey the authority, but now he stood on the edge of betrayal. Which oath mattered more, the one to the law or the one to his own humanity? Not now, Daniel called, forcing strength into his voice. I need rest. Debrief in the morning. A long silence followed. Then Rourke's voice, colder than before. Very well. But remember, the authority watches all. Even in the storm, no secret survives. His footsteps faded down the corridor. Daniel exhaled slowly, his hands trembling. He turned back to the girl and her mother. They suspect you, the girl whispered. Daniel nodded. Yes, and if they discover the truth, I will lose everything. The girl's voice broke. Then why help us? Daniel knelt beside her, looking into her wide eyes. Because no law can tell me to watch a child lose her mother. Not today, not ever. For the first time, the girl smiled faintly through her tears. She leaned forward, hugging him tightly. You are not like they said. My people feared humans, but you are different. Her words struck deep inside him. He thought of the authorities' endless rules, its codes written to keep order in the galaxy. But none of those codes spoke about this moment, about a child's tears, about the fragile breath of a dying mother. The truth was simple. Laws could not measure humanity. Still, reality weighed heavy. The mother's condition was growing worse. The portable heater and stimulants had bought time, but not enough. She needed real treatment, and that meant entering the med bay, facing scanners that would expose everything. Daniel stared at the ceiling, the hum of the base machines echoing in his ears. His commander's words returned. No secret survives. The girl's small voice pulled him back. Will she live? Daniel's throat tightened. He could not lie. Not unless I do something more. The child's glowing eyes locked on his. Then do it, please. Even if your law says no. He looked at her, at the fragile strength in her tiny frame. And he knew. The time for hesitation was over. He would risk it all. The authorities' eyes might be everywhere. But tonight, in this small room, Daniel chose to be human first, soldier second, and somewhere deep inside, he feared this choice would soon bring the storm crashing through the base walls. Not of snow, but of judgment. The base was quiet, but Daniel knew silence was an illusion. Cameras watched every hall. Sensors tracked every breath. The Galactic Authority trusted no one, not even their own explorers. Every move inside these walls was logged, recorded, judged, and yet, Daniel was about to do the one thing that could end his career, his freedom, maybe even his life. The alien mother lay on his bed, her skin pale blue and cold again. The temporary warmth from his cloak had faded. Her breathing was shallow, each inhale slower than the last. The little girl held her mother's hand, whispering softly in her alien tongue, tears running down her glowing cheeks. Daniel checked his scanner. Her life signs were collapsing. If he waited longer, there would be nothing left to save. His throat tightened. There was no choice anymore. We're going to the med bay, he whispered. The girl's eyes widened with fear. But you said, the machines will see her. Daniel nodded. Yes, they will. But without those machines, she will die. The girl looked at him, torn between terror and hope. Then she whispered, then we go. Daniel grabbed his cloak, wrapping the mother tightly. He lifted her again, her weight frighteningly light in his arms. The girl walked close, her antennae twitching nervously as if sensing the danger in every corner. He opened his door carefully, scanning the corridor. Empty, but not for long. He moved quickly, footsteps muffled by the hum of the base. The med bay was at the far end of the main hall. Every step felt like walking on a thin sheet of ice, knowing it could crack at any moment. Cameras blinked red along the ceiling. Daniel kept his head low, using the cloak to shield the mother's face from view. They turned a corner, then froze. 2 crew members walked past, laughing quietly about rations. Daniel pressed against the wall, holding his breath. The girl clung to his side, eyes wide. The crew barely glanced at him before moving on. But Daniel's pulse thundered in his ears. Finally, the med bay door slid open with a hiss. The room inside was bright, filled with white light and the hum of machines. Empty for now, Daniel hurried in, laying the alien mother inside the nearest med pod. The pod lit up instantly. A cold mechanical voice spoke. Foreign DNA detected. Warning, unauthorized life form. This action violates Galactic Code 77. The words echoed like a death sentence. Daniel's hands trembled on the console. His face reflected in the glass as the machine repeated, "Proceeding may trigger violation report. Confirm yes or no." The girl grabbed his sleeve. "Please," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Save her." Daniel's eyes burned. He thought of the law, of Commander Rourke, of the drones above. He thought of the punishment waiting for him. Then he looked at the girl's face, so small, so desperate, so full of faith in him. He pressed yes. The pod hissed shut around the alien mother. Machines whirred, lights flashing. The pod scanned her body, repairing tissue, warming blood, pumping life back into her. The girl pressed her hands against the glass, watching with tears in her eyes. Alarms blared. The system screamed, "Violation detected." Report sent to command. Daniel's stomach sank. The base was awake now. Footsteps echoed in the distance. Voices shouted. The commander would come. The pod worked quickly, but the process was not instant. The mother's chest rose slowly, stronger with each breath, but she was still fragile. The girl's voice broke through the alarms. "Is it working?" Daniel nodded. "Yes, she's fighting." The doors hissed open. Commander Rourke stepped inside with 2 officers. His eyes locked on the pod, then on Daniel. His face hardened like ice. "You," Rourke said, his voice low but sharp.
What have you done?
Daniel stepped in front of the pod, blocking it with his body. His rifle hung at his side, but he did not raise it. His voice was steady, louder than the alarms. "I saved a life." Rourke's eyes narrowed. "You broke the code. Do you understand what that means?" Daniel stood tall. "Yes, it means I remembered what it means to be human." The girl clung to his arm, her small frame shaking. She looked up at Rourke, her glowing eyes filled with tears. "Please," she begged, "he saved my mom. Don't hurt him." For a moment, the room was frozen. The alarms wailed, the pod glowed, and the silence between men was heavier than the storm outside. Rourke's hand hovered near his sidearm. His jaw tightened. The officers exchanged uneasy looks. Behind Daniel, the pod beeped. The alien mother opened her eyes weakly. She breathed deep, her chest rising with new strength. Her hand lifted slowly, pressing against the glass. Alive. The girl gasped with joy, rushing to the pod. "Mom!" she cried, her voice breaking into sobs. Daniel felt something shift inside him, something stronger than fear. He knew what would come next. He knew punishment was waiting. But in that moment, seeing the girl's tears of happiness, seeing life where there had been death, he no longer cared. He turned back to Rourke, meeting his commander's cold eyes. "You can arrest me if you want," Daniel said firmly. "But I will not apologize." "Not for this," the alarm screamed on. The mother breathed. The girl clung to him. And Daniel stood ready to face whatever judgment would come, because tonight he had made his choice. And once made, some choices cannot be undone. The alarms echoed through the med bay like iron hammers. Red lights flashed across the white walls, warning of Daniel's crime. The air felt heavy, filled with the sharp tension of betrayal and judgment. Commander Rourke stood in the doorway, his face cold, his hand resting near his weapon. 2 officers flanked him, their expressions tight and uncertain. Behind Daniel, the med pod glowed as it worked, repairing the alien mother's fragile body. The little girl stood between Daniel and the pod, her small hands pressed against the glass, tears shining in her glowing eyes. "She's breathing," she whispered almost to herself. "She's alive." Daniel did not move away from the pod. His back was straight, his jaw set. He knew what was coming, but fear no longer guided him. "You've crossed the line," Rourke said, his voice like steel. "You've broken the Galactic Code. Do you even understand the cost of what you've done?" Daniel turned his head slowly, meeting his commander's cold gaze. His voice was calm but firm. "Yes, I understand. And I don't regret it." The words cut through the room sharper than the alarms. One officer shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Rourke. Rourke's eyes narrowed. "You risked everything for them. Aliens who are not your responsibility. Do you think compassion excuses betrayal?" Daniel's voice rose, strong enough to drown out the alarms. "This isn't betrayal. This is who we are. Humans help, even when the law says no. Even when it costs us everything." The girl turned, clutching his arm. Her small voice carried into the silence. He saved my mom. Without him, she would have died in the snow. Please don't take him away. For a long moment, no one moved. The only sound was the soft hum of the pod as it finished its work. Then a final beep echoed and the glass slid open. The alien mother gasped, her chest rising with steady strength. Her eyes opened, glowing faintly in the light. She sat up weakly, looking around, and her gaze fell on Daniel. She whispered something in her tongue, then in broken English managed to say, "Thank you." The girl cried out, throwing her arms around her mother, sobbing with joy. Daniel watched, his throat tight, his chest heavy with relief. Rourke's jaw clenched. His weapon stayed in its holster, but his voice hardened. "The authority will not forgive this. You will face trial, Daniel. You may never see Earth again." Daniel turned fully toward him now, standing tall. "Maybe so. But I would rather be punished for saving a life than praised for letting one die. If that makes me guilty, then I accept it." His words hung in the air. The officers shifted again, unease written on their faces. They had followed rules all their lives, but what they had just witnessed, an alien saved. A child reunited with her mother, was something rules could not erase. The alien mother reached out, her weak hand brushing Daniel's arm. Her eyes shone with tears. "Human. Brave," she whispered. Rourke's expression flickered, the smallest crack in his icy mask. His eyes lingered on the girl clinging to her mother, on the gratitude shining in alien eyes. For a second, his hand drifted away from his weapon. "Compassion," Rourke muttered, almost to himself. The law never accounted for it. The alarms finally fell silent, leaving only the hum of the machines. The weight of the moment pressed down on all of them. Daniel exhaled slowly. He had made his choice. Whatever came next, trial, exile, punishment, he would face it. Because he knew now that laws were made to control, but humanity was made to protect. The girl looked up at him, her face glowing with pure, innocent trust. "You are our hero," she whispered. Daniel's throat tightened. He had not sought to be a hero. He had only listened to a cry in the night. But in that choice, in that act, he had shown something greater than law. Rourke finally spoke, his tone quieter than before. "I should place you under arrest. I should call the authority right now." He paused, then added, "But perhaps some acts are bigger than codes." The officers glanced at one another, uncertain. The silence stretched. Daniel met Rourke's eyes. "You don't have to understand. Just remember this moment. Remember what you saw." Rourke studied him for a long, tense moment. Then, with a sharp breath, he turned to the officers. "This never leaves this room," he ordered. "Do you understand?" The officers blinked, shocked. Then they nodded slowly. Rourke faced Daniel again. His voice was cold but softer now. "You've made me break the rules with you. Don't make me regret it." Daniel nodded once. He knew this was not forgiveness, it was survival. But it was enough. For now. The alien mother leaned weakly against her daughter. Alive. Safe. Because one human refused to walk away. And as Daniel stood there, the weight of the law still pressing on his shoulders, he realized something that would stay with him forever. Humanity's strength was not in weapons or ships or laws. It was in moments like this, when one person chose compassion over fear, when one heart answered a desperate cry. That was the answer humanity would always give.